Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Dao De Jing. I am Honorary Joe, also known as Shrikant, and I'll be the moderator today instead of Joe. So today we're going to be going through verses 58 and 59. We will start with verse 58. Go ahead and type exclamation mark in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to read a translation that is your favorite. Let's start with Evanik. Evanik, go ahead.
Okay, so this is from the Tao of Christ, a Christian version of the Dao De Jing. So verse 58, or chapter 58. When government is small, everything runs smoothly. When government is intrusive, the people push back. Unhappiness cannot exist without happiness. Happiness would not be known without unhappiness. This cycle never ceases. And what is without limits, normal breeds normal. Good gives birth to bad. This dance of opposites is the fabric of everyday life. Christ asks, but does not coerce. He is bold, but does not attack. He is righteous, but does not judge. He is light, but does not blind.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by David. Brian.
All right, this is Stephen Mitchell. If a country is governed with tolerance, the people are comfortable and honest. If a country is governed with repression, the people are depressed and crafty. When the will to power is in charge, the higher the ideals, lower the results. Try to make people happy and you lay the groundwork for misery. Try to make people moral and you lay the groundwork for vice. Thus, the master is content to serve as an example and not to impose her will. She is pointed, but doesn't pierce, straightforward, but supple, radiant, but easy on the eyes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Next up is David. David, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'm still trying to figure out this really interesting variations of the translation. Hopefully the Jason shows up. So let me try the DC Lin. It's interesting. I see Feng in English starts out with when the country is ruled light-handed, and yet Lin says when the country is lazy and dull. I mean, it's like
you can go ahead and read both of them. Please read.
It's very extreme differences.
No. But go ahead and read both of them.
Okay, so Feng in English. I mean, so when the country is ruled with a light hand, the people are simple. When the country is ruled with severity, the people are cunning. Happiness is rooted in misery. Misery lurks beneath happiness. Who knows what the future holds? There is no honesty. Honesty becomes dishonest. Goodness becomes witchcraft. Man's bewilderment lasts for a long time. Therefore, the sage is sharp, but not cunning. Pointed, but not piercing. Straightforward, but not unrestrained. Brilliant, but not blinding. DC Lin. When the government is lazy and dull, its people are unspoiled. When the government is efficient and smart, its people are disconnected. Disaster is the avenue of fortune, and fortune is the concealment for disaster. Who would be able to know its ultimate results? As it is, there would never be the normal, but the normal would immediately revert to the deceitful, and the good revert to the sinister. Thus long has mankind gone astray. Therefore the sage is square, has firm principles, but not cutting, sharp-cornered, has integrity, but does not hurt others, is straight, but not high-handed, bright, but not dazzling.
Thank you. Aman, would you like to read a translation?
Yeah, I'm normally reading with Jason, but there is a translation here by Edmund Ryden that I'm particularly fond of. And he's a very faithful translator, but let me just go ahead. Administration, bumble humble, people, simple Simon. Administration, nitty-picky, people, wheeling, dealing. Disaster, fortune's headrest. Fortune, disaster's backrest. Who knows their limit? Is there nothing orthodox? Orthodox reverts to strange, good reverts to monstrous. Humans being misled is attested from of old. For this reason, be square, but do not cut. Be angular, but do not poke. Be straight, but do not force. Be bright, but do not dazzle. This is the translation I often consult when I work with Jason on his. And it's interesting to see how very sort of loose terminology he uses in this one. Ryden does.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is going to be Margarita, followed by Allison. Margarita.
Yes, I will read in Bahasa. Jika peraturan pemerintah sederhana, maka rakyat akan mentaati dengan patuh. Jika pemerintah mempertajam politiknya, maka rakyat akan gelisah. Suatu bencana adalah sandaran dari keberuntungan. Sebaliknya, keberuntungan adalah tempat sembunyi dari bencana. Siapakah yang mengetahui dengan jelas jika rajanya tidak adil? Bila ada orang jujur dan adil dalam pemerintahan, segera dirintangi. Bila ada orang bijak dalam pemerintahan, segera dikacaukan. Demikianlah orang yang tersesat jauh untuk sekian lama. Dari itu, raja bijak berlaku adil, tenggang rasa, tapi tidak menggunakan kekerasan untuk menghukum. Tulus hati dan tak menyusahkan orang. Berhati lurus dan tidak korupsi. Terang tapi tidak menyilaukan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Next up is going to be Allison, followed by Dana. Allison.
Hi, I have the Sam Trode version. When an administration practices simplicity, the people are content. When an administration is nosy, the people become unruly. When the labor of the many supports the happiness of the few, such happiness only conceals misery. Who can stop the cycle? It never ceases. The normal becomes abnormal. The fortunate becomes unfortunate. The people are kept in confusion. Wise rulers are square, but they do not poke. They are angular, but do not injure. They are upright, but not cross. They are bright, but not glaring.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. Next up is Dana. Dana, go ahead.
I have to unmute. Okay. Title is Simplicity Runs Deep in Still Waters, number 58. When leaders govern from the heart, the lives people live become simple, uncomplicated. Creativity and honesty permeate the culture. There is peace and cooperation. People feel connected with the community. When leaders rule with intrusion and enforcement, the lives people live become problematic. Fears and self-protection take shape. There is unrest and distrust. People feel loneliness and alienation from the community. When the iron hand exerts control over people, rules and principles become paramount. Greed is offered an open door. Nothing is lonelier or more destructive to the soul than distrust. Fortune and calamity are siblings born at the same time. They sustain one another. Good rising from difficulty, misfortune woven into the strands of success. Who can read the path that lies ahead? Today, the noble succumb to deception. Tomorrow, the righteous turn towards self-interest. Imposters come clean, rehabilitated. There is no justice.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana. I'm going to read the one by Ursula Le Guin. It is titled Living with Change. When the government's dull and confused, the people are placid. When the government is sharp and keen, the people are discontented. Alas, misery lies under happiness, and happiness sits on misery, alas. Who knows where it will end? Nothing is certain. The normal changes into the monstrous, the fortunate into the unfortunate, and our bewilderment goes on and on. And so the wise shape without cutting, square without sawing, true without forcing. They are the light that does not shine. She has a short paragraph of commentary. In the first verse, the words dull and confused and sharp and keen are, as Wally points out, the words used in chapter 20 to describe the Taoist and the non-Taoist. In the last verse, most translators say the Taoist is square but doesn't cut, shines but doesn't dazzle. Wally says that this misses the point. The point is that Taoists gain their ends without the use of means. That is indeed a light that does not shine, an idea that must be pondered and brooded over. A small, dark light. Next up is Jason. Jason.
Oh, yes. Okay. Let me share my screen. Shoot. Yeah, okay. Did you see the screen or no?
It's coming up.
Oh, hold on. I'm probably showing the wrong screen. Let me one more time. It should be. One more time. Okay.
Sure.
This one. Is that right?
Yes, it's correct.
58. Let me read my translation, and then I really appreciate, especially Srikanth and Dana's translation, because look guys, we are going on the two different ends. Okay, I'm on the original text, and especially Dana make a beautiful writing on the other end. So I think that would be a wonderful compare. A greater comparison. So, okay, let me read. If the government is inward reflective, the people will be honest. If the government is outward inspective, the people will be cunning. So here I like to use, I think it's the same as Srikanth talking about, it's related to chapter 20. If you go back to look at chapter 20, chapter 20 is the author kind of reflecting himself. He's retiring. He talked about everybody is this word, 查查, okay? And I myself is this way, 闷闷, okay? So the translation is very funny, okay? And then I think most of people take this word, 闷闷, as like upset, dual, confusing, not in a good mood. I think that's today's meaning. And I believe in the 2,500 years ago, people don't have such a psychological words. So if you look at the word, if you know Chinese, that's the a door and the heart inside the door. So my interpretation, and which I still believe is correct, honestly, to the words is 58 and 20. They talk about this word. 闷闷 means you look at inside, close the door, look at inside. 查查, the second one, that means outside looking, check outside. So in these two stanzas, Lao Tzu is talking about if the government is looking inside, okay, then the people will be honest. if the government is checking outside, be sharp, looking at, examining what people are doing, people will become cunning. I think that's the first two is talking about. Then the next two is kind of talking about unexpected changing. Okay, misfortune is the fortune leans on. Fortune is what misfortune hides under. I just do the words to words translation. Basically, you are seeking something misfortune. Actually, that's the fortune is coming. If you see something is fortune, you should always be careful because the misfortune is hiding. So that's what he's talking about. So the next we're talking about who knows the limit. There is no proper expectation. I think last week we talked about this word, so-called 正, okay, and the expected may become unexpected. So 正, this word is very wide meaning. So here you talk about 正 and 齐, same as last week. We talk about the government should govern with 正. That means what people expected. Okay. So today we said governed by law. That means we do something. Government policy is what expected. People before do anything, go out the street, you know what the law it is, right? But when you do attack, wage a war, you do something people unexpected. So here he's talking about change. He's talking about something you expected. It may turn out to something unexpected. So you don't expect too much. Then next word, 善复为妖, talking about the good may become weak. So expected become unexpected, good and become weak. So you don't look at the surface. Okay, be careful. The fortune, misfortune, expected, unexpected, good and the weak, they are not fixed. Okay, so then they draw the conclusion. Kind of most people are confused for a long time. Then we come with another full teaching. Okay, so this one is a little bit strange because some texts, I think the Dana's translation put this one before the this sentence. So I see some translation put this one because logically probably makes sense because they talking about the government, then talk about the sage, what to do, then talk about the expected, unexpected. I think logically makes sense. And I do see some version put this 5 stanza in front instead of at the end. Okay, so I'm going to do this one. So for this reason, the sage is squared. I think square means principle, yet not cutting, means shut corners. Irreproachable, yet not unforgiving. Okay, so that means he is perfect, kind of perfect, irreproachable, incorrupt, but not hurting other people. So many times we see people are righteous, right? Kind of criticize other people. So you don't want to be along with the people to have too much or too high moral standard. It may make you feel bad. Okay, I think that's at least my personal experience. So straightforward, yet not unbridled, bright, yet not brazen. So that's the final teaching. I'd like to mention here is they talk about 4 moral, okay, principled, irreproachable, straightforward, and bright. This one sounds like more like a Confucian teaching, Confucian's morality. But Lao Tzu here give you some of the warning, okay? You be square, principle, but you don't cut, you don't show the corner. You be irreproachable, but you don't, not unforgiving, okay? You are straightforward, but not unbridled. You are bright, but you don't show it off, okay? Let people. So I think that's try to see Lao Tzu try to see the difference, right, between the Confucius teaching and the Taoism teaching. Okay, so I will end up here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just for context, I'm going to read out number 20 to make this point, this distinction, because in 20, they make this distinction very, very clear. Ursula Le Guin calls it being different. How much difference between yes and no? What difference between good and bad? What the people fear must be feared. Oh, desolation. Not yet. Not yet has it reached its limit. Everybody is cheerful, cheerful as if at a party or climbing a tower in springtime. And here I sit, unmoved, clueless, like a child, a baby too young to smile, forlorn, like a homeless person. Most people have plenty. I'm the one that's poor, a fool right through, ignorant. Most people are so bright. I'm the one that's dull. Most people are so keen. I don't have the answers. Oh, I'm desolate, at sea, adrift, without harbor. Everybody has something to do. I'm the clumsy one, out of place. I'm the different one. For my food is the milk of the mother. Jason, could you start by talking about the connection between 20 and 58? And then I'm going to welcome everybody to comment on 58.
I think the key difference here is between 20 and 58. 20 is talking about the self, right? A person, okay? And then the 58 talk about the government. So I think that's the key difference. And the mode is different. Chapter 20, at least in my interpretation, chapter 20 is whoever, the author, he is retiring. He kind of like feel I've done enough, and the words like this. So you guys doing cha-cha, so-called cha-cha, smart, outside looking, and myself is men. Okay, I look inside, I do myself. You guys are happy, I'm doing my own way. I go back to my home, to the words that say, eat mother. Okay, so I believe he go to his hometown, retiring. That's my interpretation. And the 58 is different. It's more the secular, talking about what you need to do as a government and as a prince, what your personality should be. Okay, so that's my interpretation.
Wonderful. Folks, now if you would like to comment about number 58, please go ahead, type an exclamation mark to talk about what you got from this verse.
I think Aman want to talk about something.
Aman, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of coattail on what Jason was talking about, the difference between 20 and 58, and how 20 is an inward reflective sort of passage. That this one has to do with governance is probably why there is so much allusion to Confucianism or to the Confucian scholar, because those were the instruments of government for the most part through most of Chinese history. And finding a way of saying what he was in chapter 20 and saying a good that these people are, but how they could be better by not pushing as hard as they do, I think is really the distinction between 20 and 58. In 58, he's saying these are good qualities, but there's a cost if you take them to an extreme. And so one of the central Taoist lessons of don't take things to an extreme is what's imparted a lot, especially in those four virtues being extolled as these are valuable, but they can be, cutting. They can have a cost if you are too self-righteous, if you are too upright, if you are too unwieldy and unbending. I think by this point, most readers would get this already, but here it is couched one more time. And the cost to society at large is also extrapolated from it. So if you try and be this way, if you don't be this way at all, the government may be so flaccid as to be ineffectual. But if you try so hard to be the micromanaging functionary, you can ruin government by inspecting every little detail.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is Evanique, followed by Katie. Evanique.
What struck me about this one is the contrast, especially in the second block of lines, where it says unhappiness cannot exist without happiness. Happiness would not be known without unhappiness. I think when you look at it like that, it's like you need shades of light and dark. I think of that like you need the darkness to know, to have the light shine through it and be bright. And you need the light to emphasize, not to emphasize, but to know what the darkness is. And it's not necessarily bad. It's about experience, right? So it's just, and if you think about it, in a world of so many people, different and diversities, what may be good for one may not be good for another. And so it kind of just has to go in sequence of what it is. Like you got to let it flow in a lot of cases. So I was just thinking about that, and that's what struck me. And then it says the cycle never ceases and is without limits. And it brought me to yesterday when, in a design way, we were talking about limitations, can be creative. It can take you to new heights if you just embrace the limitations of a material. And I was thinking of that, if you look at it, if the cycle never ceases, there's just no limits to what can be done, right? If you just accept it, that's what's so. And sometimes we try to, as human beings, try to strive for happiness, and government tries to strive for happiness, utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people is kind of what a lot of governments go for. And it shouldn't be the goal. It's like happiness shouldn't be the goal. It should be experience. It should be, making sure that, I don't know what, it's making sure that people can express themselves and be safe. And I think safe is different than being happy. Being safe is making sure that people can't hurt you when you're trying to express yourself freely. And I think that's what the government is supposed to do. And I think sometimes leaders, in attempts to gain power or to shine, which goes down to the bottom verse, when they're trying to say they do not, what a good leader is, a lot of times leaders are trying to stand out. So they'll tell you things to make you happy. But in reality, they can't do that. That's impossible for a leader to make someone happy. The only thing a leader can do is make sure everybody is safe. That way they can pursue what they need to pursue and have their own experience in this thing called life. So that's what stood out for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Katie, followed by Jen. Katie.
I had a couple of thoughts. I liked Amon's use of the word micromanaging. It kind of reminded me also of like helicopter parents. And I'm not a parent myself, so people have to be kind of patient. But when you watch people that are like try to overly control their children, and then you sometimes watch people either like not learn responsibility for themselves or rebel if it's too strict. And then my second thought was really the language of the poem. I feel like for example, in Stephen Mitchell, he uses vice, which gets kind of into the kind of the good evil dichotomy, versus in Jason's translation, it stays closer to like inwardly reflecting and outwardly reflecting without really focusing on it as like an idea of sin. It's more just like the focus is on yourself versus the focus is on other people. So I thought that was interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. I really like that, the connection with parenting. I think that's very, very good connection. Next up is Cheng.
Yeah, I also want to share is about the misery and happiness. And it's very similar to what we learned earlier about how, the opposite define each other. And I found it's actually cautious us. In Chinese, there's a saying, 乐极生悲. That means we are overly happy, joy, then you actually become a tragedy. So it's kind of like, I think part of the reason when people are overly joyed, they become less cautious. So then these things can't happen to them, they even notice. So put them into trouble. So in this perspective, exactly keep people more like in the middle. So you either not too happy to be ignored or too cautious to not be able to enjoy life. You can like stay in between. I think that's help you to be aware of that. And also about the, I think Avnik mentioned about, happiness should not be the goal. And I think the thing, it's interesting how funny when we have bigger challenge, we can do more. So basically when we suffer more, we can sustain more. So the reason we have so many depression in America nowadays and the life standard is so high, is kind of like funny how in the very poor country, people are very happy because they are easily be satisfied with very little. Or in our country, like people have so much things, they are so easily depressed. I think that's also show when you don't have bigger challenge. That's what I tell my mom, because she used to be a manager at the company. She varies things, so she planning everything. Now she is retired. She's still planning her little life, and like so detailed. It's like there's no need to plan your life. Nothing will happen big will happen. Just relax. I think that shows how when we do have big things, all the minor things become big things. So let's try to take care of more bigger things so we don't triple ourselves with minor things.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Zheng. Next up is going to be Jason. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment a lot about Katie talking about the vice, the translation about vice. Let me just share my screen one more time. I just try to be picky on the translation of the words. The words, I think Amang and I have a discussion on this one. On this one, we are talking about the good and the bad. And if you look at these words, basically this one means, in today's way, means something like a ghost, okay? So it's a good and a ghost. But I kind of think about in general, Taoism is not very clear on the good and the evil. Okay, good and bad, they don't have this kind, they try to avoid this kind of confusion concept. Okay, good, bad, okay, evil, good, this kind of thing. So basically, these words means, today means ghost, but at the time, the original meaning is the beautiful, but not in the right, not in the expected way. Okay, so opposite to this sun means skillful or good. Okay, so I think that means a good in the right way and a good in the wrong way or in the unexpected way. I think that's the way I like to point out. Okay, and second thing is a lot of translation talk about happiness, could be unhappiness, and unhappiness could be happiness. And I think because of the translation of these two words, but I just have to say, based on the word itself, it doesn't mean the happiness, unhappiness. It means lucky, fortune, okay, and unfortunate by the words. Okay, so that's I like to point out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next up is Amon. Amon, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, Jason, that was a great lead-in, because this idea of fortune and misfortune, and it kind of ties in with what Dang was talking about before, about expectations and the environment you live in. Two occurrences come to my mind. I remember all the way back September 11th of 2001. Shortly thereafter, our president told us in this country to go shopping. That didn't really seem to mollify. I don't know if it hit quite the right note, but it seemed to be this idea of go gain happiness, go out, pursue and gain happiness, trust that we've got this. I personally did not feel incredibly comforted by that, but that is sort of that idea that if your government just orients towards keeping the people blissful. I won't even say happy necessarily in the same way, but keeping them blissful, keeping them, in high spirits. Does that do well to join a people together? And I'd say not greatly. Conversely, I was recently watching an interview with a pastor of a South Carolina church who was talking about the difficulty of keeping his parish together as they are having more and more political divide. And he said, but nothing brings the people together more than a hurricane. If you see a hurricane actually come through, nobody is asking one another, who'd you vote for? They're going to their neighbors and they're helping out. And you can actually see a community pull together tighter and more cohesively in the face of adversity. I think this is what those two lines, misfortune is what fortune leans on. Fortune is what misfortune hides under. Really, those were the two occurrences that just struck me as emblematic of those two lines from this chapter. And I think everybody's kind of hit that pretty well on the head.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is Abraham.
Oh, good evening again. This is the first time, and I'm trying to listen and follow up. I wish I can join Tuesday a little more if my work schedule allow. The wisdom tradition and also the circular logic, happiness and unhappiness, and misery and prosperity, second paragraph, those things, I felt like just being here like 30 minutes, it reminds me my high school days. So we learned, I'm from South Korea, 6 years, middle school, 3 years, high school, 3 years, Taoism, Christianity, Confucianism, and also Buddhism in school. So you have to memorize a lot of things. And also some of the literature from Lao Tzu and Zhang Tzu appear in Korean SAT. So like, for example, the famous line, I'm not sure whether I was dreaming or I was dreaming in a dream, something like that. So when I was in high school, I'm just giving you some different perspective from different countries. We studied 6 years, so we hated it. We were like teenagers, we wanted to explore. So Taoism for us, like life is short, it's okay, be happy, and it's water. So like, what are you talking? We were like, and also we learned Taoism in the context of Taiping Rebellion. After first Opium War, China was defeated, humiliated. They thought they are the center of the world, but they were defeated because of British Western superpower. People started to rely on, I would say they were addicted, drink this one, opium, and also Taoism. That's what we had to memorize. So Taoism for us was not so good. If you are lazy and do not want to work, want to just listen hipster rocks, Taoism okay. So that was kind of the bigger context. Anyhow, so yeah, thank you for bringing me to high school days. Yeah.
Thank you. Jason, you have any comment?
Abraham talking about the Zhuangzi is a butterfly dream. I think he mentioned it.
Okay.
And I just want to comment. I'm so surprised the Korean government put so much effort on the Chinese philosophy education. The intention is pretty good, but the method probably terrible. And Abraham one time told me he has to memorize the multiple choice. Who has dreamed about the butterfly and think doubted the butterfly? There's like 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, and the kids have to memorize.
I just want to say that it reminds me of the line that the education is wasted on the young. Because like what happens is that when you are force-fed, even the greatest things, when you don't want it, that actually destroys your capability of having any appreciation of it. Next up, and you have to kind of, as adults, you have to regain and see actually what it means. We'll go with Amon, followed by Kevin. Come on.
I just wanted to comment on Abraham's comments, which I appreciated deeply. I think that more Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi on the SATs would be preferable, but I have a bias. And I also wanted to say it's not horribly surprising that in the context of the schooling in what was traditionally a very Confucian imbued culture in Korea, that Taoism would be targeted as the most culprit of woeful ideologies, philosophies, schools of religion that was part and parcel responsible for the century of humiliation that China underwent with the Opium Wars, with the invasion. The Taiping Rebellion wasn't anything to do with Taoism. That was actually a Christian-led cult in China. But yeah, China, in the end of the empirical period, through the Republic, through communism, expelling the old, the superstitious, the antiquated was a big part of Chinese culture's push to try and gain modernity. And Taoism fell right into the crosshairs of the most antiquated and the most useless. And that was in no small part because Confucians weren't going to take responsibility for mismanaging, you know, the dynasty and the empire into oblivion. So those, you know, quiet little monks on the hill, we'll blame them. And that's kept going for almost a century. So it's not shocking, but it definitely deserved just a little bit of context.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is going to be Kevin, Margaret, Chang, and Abraham. Kevin. Kevin, there is some problem with your mic.
Then we go, right?
Go ahead.
Now
Yes.
better.
Yep.
Yes, basically, Jason mentioned this word before also, men, the first word. From a language itself, this word already used to be, I believe, Dao, the Kongzi, Lao Tzu time, very valued this gloomy. Basically, heart, focus inward. So valued that. Now slowly this becomes to kind of negative, gloomy, right? It's a kind of, you are not happy. So that's the difference. That's our language itself change word from this word. Second point for me, we lack of a kind of central balanced language. We always have fault dilemma. Good, bad, yes, no. So that's why we even from Dao De Jing, last time I managed to use those describe those very happy neutral point from if from this square, not to cut, from this irreproachable, not unforgiving, straightforward, not unbridled. I basically read Jason translation again. The signing, not blazing. So what's the middle, but like dynamic balanced language for that? We need ourselves like a seesaw from right to left. We need to find that middle point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Margarita. Margarita, go ahead.
Yes, I like this verse. It makes me thinking about the first part. I think it's similar with the 38, if I'm not mistaken, how we can rule without using power, too much power. Actually, it's quite clear. It's stated that, to rule, you don't need power. In fact, don't use power at all. Everything will work out. However, even such obvious expressive verse like this can be used by people with political intention, like just what happened with Abraham there. So, and that's also happened with other texts, texts coming from so-called peaceful and loving religion can be so unloving and can be so judging So I think in a way we need to understand more how to make relationship with this kind of text. And I think what's interesting, this verse also tells about how to make relationship with this kind of text. At part when they again talk about square, I think the square but without sharp corner here, it's quite interesting concept, which already explained, I think, in the 41 verse before. So we know what we need to do. Nevertheless, it should not be cornered, it should not be pushed to other people. You can let people know, you can make access toward this text, but you cannot teach them forcefully. You cannot expect people to do it. So I think that's also what we need to put in mind when we read other texts as well. So it will not hurt us. It just be a square without sharp corner, and it shall not hurt other people because we make the corner very pointy toward other people. Yeah, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Thank you. Next up is Cheng. Cheng, go ahead.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to hear Abraham, they learn all this in Korean. And I was in China, I didn't learn any of those when I was in school. I know about the butterfly dream, you know, but not in school. So what I want to say is it's very understandable. You know, like Taoism is never in Ming culture. You know, Confucian is always in the Ming culture. A lot of governments support it because it's conform to all the tradition, is follow the hierarchy, is basically support the government. But Taoism is more like self-individualization, like what Carl Jung was talking about, which is now a lot of government support because it's like democracy is hard to fulfill, you know, takes more effort. I think that may be the reason it's never, I think it's never in the Ming culture even in mainland China. And I think that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheng. Next up is Abraham, followed by Katie and Marco. Abraham.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit what I shared, there seems to be some misunderstanding, or I want to correct it. That was my impression and my some of a memory, but actually we learned not only 5,000 years of Korean history, we learned Western history. We had 6 years, Japanese history, Chinese history, some of Indian history. So not in a rudimentary way, we have to like college courses, almost like that. And also mathematics and things like that. That's the first one. Second one is, I really agree with the insight from Cheng. So when the society is relatively poor, want to make economy better, they want focus, not like this kind of individualized Taoism. So I think they were not popular. But I think more and more Westerners now, and also some Asian country, they're affluent. So they have room for different kind of ideas. Yeah. The thirdly, Cheng also mentioned why kind of she said that they didn't learn about these things in school. My interpretation is Chinese government, once they took the power, I mean, the Communist Party, they suppressed many things as far as the religious and some of the facts. For example, no offense to anyone, there were 3 dynasties.
Let's not go too much into politics because we are looking at number 58.
No, I'm not talking about politics.
Okay, sure.
Just the before Chinese government, there was a Tang dynasty, the Chong dynasty, and then before that Myeong dynasty. Before that there was Tang dynasty, if you know that. So out of that, only Myeong dynasty was ruled by Han people. 2 other dynasties, we call it dynasties, they were different countries. So that's why I think the Chinese government do not want to dig out so many things. That's anyhow.
Thank you. Thank you, Abraham. So I want to make one point, like Taoism focuses on nature as opposed to culture. And it is a reminder for us to remember nature, to go back to nature and deal with culture from that angle. Another way of saying it is that Taoism is all about going inside and figuring out kind of deep patterns that are inside and using them to do something outside and not take outside whatever is there in culture as given. So it is kind of inside based and nature based as opposed to outside and culture based. So that's the big difference that I see. Next up is going to be Katie, Marco, and Kevin. Katie.
What I was going to say is right in line with what you were saying, that looking inside also might be very peaceful because you have control over what you do yourself. Like, so you might feel like you have like this kind of like acceptance. Well, like you have control over what, not over everything, but a large degree of control over what you do versus like you don't have control over what other people do. Like they're making their own decisions independent of you. So for me, that kind of leads to a more peaceful orientation if you don't have to take on other responsibility for other people's actions.
Yeah, that's excellent point. That's one thing I wanted to ask Jason and Amon. When I look at this whole verse, it has three parts. There is a beginning part and there is an end part, which is very similar to each other. And then there is a middle. The middle is about nature of existence itself, that happiness is rooted in misery, misery lurks beneath happiness. Who knows what the future holds? There is no honesty. Honesty becomes dishonest. Goodness becomes witchcraft. Man's bewilderness lasts for a long time. So this is all about the messiness of nature, of going back and forth. The beginning and the end is about how to deal with it. So it says, when a country is ruled with light hand, the people are simple. When the country is ruled with severity, the people are cunning. And at the end, the third part, the last part says, therefore the sage is sharp, but not cutting, pointed, but not piercing, straightforward, but not unrestrained, brilliant, but not blinding. So it is saying that, I mean, the way I understand it is that the middle part is saying that reality is messy. So don't try to micromanage it. Don't try to control it with an iron hand. That does not work. Have a light touch and flow with whatever it is. I think Ursula's translation, so the wise shape without cutting, square without sawing, true without forcing. They are the light that doesn't shine. So that light touch, I think it's, so the beginning and the end are talking about how to deal with this in the middle. So any thoughts, Jason or Amon?
Okay, basically I agree with what you talk about this situation. I would say in this text, basically is talking about wu wei, non-action. Okay, so if you look at it based on the three parts, right? First part talk about the government, right? The government don't go outside to check on the people. Okay, then talk about don't rely on fortune, misfortune, don't judge on the good, bad, okay, and that's not what you are looking for. Then the last part talk about the sage, right? The sage, what you should do, remember the first thing, talk about the free principle of square but not cut, is reproachable but not unforgiving. Okay, straightforward but not unbridled, bright but not brazen. Talk about the good virtue, but not going too much, kind of like hidden. Okay, so don't hurt other people. I think that's the message is talking about. So if you ask me what's the title for this one, I will talk about it's a wu wei. Okay, this one another practice of wu wei. Okay, thank you.
Amon, what do you think?
Yeah, last week we discussed, I'm going to put it into the chat, this term, zhang, quite a few times, and it appears here again in this chapter. And I thought about this after last week quite a bit. It's fascinating because this is the term that is so common in Confucianism as, and often translated as, a rectification of names. But then if we read through the Dao De Jing, when we generally see this, it's a rectification of the people. There are two very different images at work there. To make things rectified or upright or in their proper order. If you talk about names or words, that's simply, composing a dictionary. Get all the words set out like butterflies on corkboard. There they are. Everyone understands them. It's relatively simple and straightforward. But to rectify a people, you're looking at something that can't be corked down, that can't be, set in one place and said to be correct. If you look at a state from a 30,000 foot view, it's like a bustling anthill of activity. And this gets at that chaos you were talking about. How do you rectify that? You don't do it by getting everything in its proper order. If anything, you step back far enough to see that whole picture. And if you need something to move, you just kind of encourage the ants to go and move to that area. You don't force them there and pluck them with tweezers one by one to put them in place. I feel that this term, zheng, is kind of the point of contention between the Confucian understanding of the term and the Taoist understanding of the term. And that this chapter really sort of drives that home as, you can't do this sort of selective, place in proper order that you could do with names with a people. You need to let them bustle. You need to let them appear chaotic, and you need to see it for what it is and take a very light touch, because any sort of heavy-handed approach is going to come with a whole host of unintended consequences.
Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is Marco, Kevin, Brian, and Madeline. Marco.
What I got from the verse is just again, like this striving for balance, and not especially for the part about happiness, not being so hung up about it, and sort of not being addicted to happiness, because misery is right around the corner. But also with misery, happiness is just around the corner. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Next up is Kevin and Brian. Kevin.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to follow Amon about it. That word is yes, it's very important. And second is what's Zheng? It's about choice, harmony, and balance. Temptation to live with nature, like you say, you writing a point, right? And for last conclusion, I would say use the normal way. It's why you say my translation. People with a way are square and not rigid. Even if they have edges and corners, they will not hurt other people. They are straightforward but not arrogant, bright but not daily. Basically, we work with a co-worker, family members. Sometimes we have our own principle, we think, but we don't lazy. That's my principle. Yes, you cannot do this. You have to find a way, how to talk the way, work the way, find out. Even use the square, the thing. You don't want to hurt others' feeling and other people. Yeah, that's something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
First of all, I'd agree with what David said at the very beginning. There are so many different translations. I read 4 or 5 different translations before the meeting. Then we had Jason's and I heard others. Very different. I like Jason's translation. I don't have it on the screen right now, so I should have taken a screenshot. But I have an impression from all of these, many different translations. They all have an element of time in them. And in the comments that Shrikant made and Aman made most recently and others have made, there's this, everyone is kind of recognizing, but nobody has really said or emphasized. I just want to emphasize that element of time in that, yeah, you might be in balance at one moment, but the next moment you are not in balance because there's change. Change is unpredictable. And because of that, you are uncertain even at where you are in the moment. There was one of the lines from one of the translations was, we don't know the limits because we don't know the norm. And so we don't know where we are on the swings of the pendulum at any point in time. We don't know how far the pendulum's going to swing. So given that uncertainty, that unpredictability, the better is a restrained, a reserved, a humble approach as a governor. Any other attempt will just be swept aside or will interfere in the flow of time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Before we go to 59, Jason, I had a question for you. Oh, Jason, first, go ahead.
Well, yeah, answer your question first. Then
No, my question is more involved. Please make your comment and then I'll ask you a
I
question.
just want to talk about just among talk about the word 正, okay, the words we talked about last week and this week, and my understanding of this very common word. Okay, just give an example. The words keep changing. In my teenager time, when we as a teenager boy see a young beautiful girl, we will call 正. Okay, that means beautiful, but he's totally not here. So I will say in the ancient time, during that time, I kind of feel this way. 正, this word, Chinese philosopher worship this word. Okay, so for Taoism, I think the 正 means what is expected. So the opposite word would be not expected. Okay, Confucius. Okay, Confucius, since it's followed by ritual. So 正 in Confucius, when Confucius worshiped this word, he is talking about the rectifying. Okay, so the opposite would be doing something not by rule, okay, not by tradition. Okay, so that's the confusion. Legalism also worship this word. So that means corrective. Okay, so the opposite word would be rebel, okay, or illegal, something like this. So this word is so important in the ancient time, but for different school of philosophy, they have the different meaning on that. So that's I want to say.
Wonderful. So Jason, I had a question for you. Everybody is really appreciating your translations, all the translations. So I want to do a meetup just on your translations. What I want to do is I want to go through, because we've been listening to your translations with all your explanations. I want to listen to your translations as a whole, like several of the verses read out in your translation, you reading out, and then talking about them as a whole, because I want to see what kind of picture emerges after listening to multiple verses. Is that something, I know that you're stuck in quarantine in Taiwan, so this is a good time to do this, Jason. So what do you think about maybe Sunday or so, Sunday evening, our time? Does that work?
Yeah, we can work on the time. Yeah, but remember, time is different. Right now, my time is 10 o'clock.
Sure.
Okay.
So let me give you time in Eastern time, and you tell me I can do it 7 p.m. Eastern time or 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday Eastern time. Do either of them work for you?
I think it works. Eastern time in the morning?
No, Eastern time in the evening, 9 p.m. Eastern time.
That would be about this start time.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the time that, exactly the time that this one starts.
Okay, but it's my Monday.
Right.
Yeah, probably okay. Yeah, probably okay.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, 9 p.m. is okay, or 7 p.m. Would you prefer 9 p.m. or 7 p.m.? Either will work.
7 p.m. will be my Sunday 7 p.m. I think that'll be fine. 7 p.m. will be fine.
7 p.m. Amon, does that work for you?
7 p.m. would be 6, 5, 4. I think I should be able to do that. Yeah, that should be about 4 o'clock my time.
Okay. Okay. perfect.
No, in Sunday your time, right? 4 o'clock Sunday your time. So
No, 4 o'clock. That's going to be Pacific time. 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, and whatever a.m. Monday your time. Okay.
Monday.
Perfect. So let's do this. How many of verses would you like to do at a time?
Let me think about it.
Okay, so let me know.
You want to do it every?
No, I just want to start out. I want to do it once to see what it is like, and then we'll figure out what to do, how to take it from there.
Okay, let me exchange email with you.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So
okay. All right, folks. So mark your calendars. This Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be doing a meetup just on Jason's translations. Okay, I want to ask him about a translation a little bit, talk to him a little bit about translation, talk to Amon a little bit, and then we will read a whole bunch, at least 10 of the translations in sequence. Jason will read that, and then we'll talk about it, something like that. I'll figure out the details with Jason, and I will put all the details on the meetup. All right. Okay, let's go to number 59. Who would like to read their translation? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Number 59. We'll start with Brian.
Okay.
Penny.
Okay, this is Stephen Mitchell again. For governing a country well, there is nothing better than moderation. The mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas, tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunshine, firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. He has no destination in view and makes use of anything life happens to bring his way. Nothing is impossible for him because he has let go. He can care for the people's welfare as a mother cares for her child.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Next up is Evanique, followed by David. Evanique.
Mine is the Tao of Christ, a Christian version of the Dao De Jing, chapter 59. Whether in politics or religion, nothing is better than moderation. Teach moderation at an early age. Those who know God early in life will not depart from God later in life. Nothing is impossible for a young person who follows God. If one believes that nothing is impossible, then one will attempt impossible things. One can even cause a country to change. The one who is moderate in all things will persevere and endure all things. She is like a tree with deep roots, a strong trunk. Storms cannot move one rooted in God.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up is David, followed by Greg. David.
Yes, the thing in English version. In caring for others and serving heaven, there is nothing like using restraint. Restraint begins with giving up one's own ideas. This depends on virtue gathered in the past. If there is a good store of virtue, then nothing is impossible. If nothing is impossible, then there are no limits. If a man knows no limits, then he is fit to be a ruler. The mother principle of ruling holds good for a long time. This is called having deep roots and a firm foundation. The Tao of long life and eternal vision.
Thank you, David. Greg, would you like to read Red Pine?
I don't have it with me right now. Sorry.
Right, that's fine. Dana, would you like to read your translation?
I'd be honored. Here we go. Tapping into the deep root. As energy unites mother and child, the eternal flow from the Tao brings forth reality, nurturing, sustaining the tension that holds everything together as one. Hold that tension. Feel the bond of the mother. No child is beyond the reach of the mother's voice. Embrace nature to awaken unlimited possibilities. To lead humanity while serving the Tao, nothing steadies the journey more than being minimal. It is a balancing act, this dance between existence and the Tao. Being at the right place at the right time, the right action is revealed. Be like the Tao, fluid, receptive, in sync. People become tangled in the desire to be expansive, to bring benefit from the world toward themselves. Yet when a vessel has been filled, it is useless if all the emptiness is gone. Leave room in your life for possibility. Being true to the Tao takes patience and restraint. To resist doing in order to awaken being. The sage expresses herself with readiness and deliberation, gently opening herself to new horizons as a butterfly awaiting transformation.
Thank you, Dana. I'm going to read Ursula Le Guin. She calls it Staying on the Way. In looking after your life and following the way, gather spirit. Gather spirit early, and so redouble power, and so become invulnerable, unlimited. You can do what you like with material things, but only if you hold to the mother of things will you do it for long. Have deep roots, a strong trunk. Live long by looking long. Margarita.
I will read bahasa again. Jika orang bijak memimpin dan mengabdi pada langit, tidak boleh tidak harus sederhana. Siapa yang sederhana artinya mencegah. Mencegah berarti memperkuat kebajikan. Jika kebajikan tercapai, tak ada yang tidak bisa terselesaikan. Setelah tak ada sesuatu yang tak dapat dilakukan, maka ia tanpa mengetahui telah mencapai kesempurnaan. Barang siapa yang tak mengetahui kesempurnaan diri, ia adalah seorang bijak yang memiliki kecakapan untuk memerintah sebuah negeri. Seorang bijak yang memimpin, maka kedudukannya akan langgeng, bagai pohon yang berakar dalam dan cabangnya teguh, hidup kekal dan abadi sesuai dengan Tao. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Jason. Jason, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so this one, I call it the temperance. Okay, so let me read the translation. Okay, so in governing people and serving heaven, there is nothing more important than temperance. That's the main sentence. So right now here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a few stanza. Basics is talking about step by step from temperance, okay, to step by step going up. So, okay, only people of temperance can have early submission. Early submission is to reaccumulate the virtue. Reaccumulate virtue leads to invisibility. Invisibility leads to unlimited potential. People with unlimited potential can rule the state. Ruling the state with this principle can last long. Let me finally talk about this is the principle. Okay, basically they use the words Dao, the principle of being deeply rooted on firm foundation, non-living and successive ruling. So I'd like to mention two things. First is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stanza. If you pay attention, you will find out that's very typical Chinese, ancient Chinese rhetoric. Okay, basics like, and this Saturday I'm going to talk about the great learning. Basics that follow the same way from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so-called the chain syllogism. Okay, so you beat temperance, then that means you have early submission or early preparation. The early preparation, early submission also means to reaccumulate your de, and the accumulated de means it's blah 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 to the end. Okay, so that's very, you will find out this kind of so-called logic being used in the ancient Chinese. So question would be, does it logically sound? Okay, does it convincing? Okay, but that's up to you to decide. But when you memorize, you kind of feel like, yeah, that's it. So I think that's the one thing I'd like to mention. Second, I think that this one means the qiang, this word, if take the word meaning, but means parsimony, okay? Or I think that means temperance, okay? So if you see this one, kind of also talk about wu wei, okay? Okay, so talk about step by step wu wei. If you compare this kind of concept, everybody know, take no brainer to know, okay? It's nothing go to extreme, too much, too little, both are, either one are bad. We should find in the balance. I think everybody know, but in different school, they have a different concept of the middle way, right? In Taoism, talking about temperance, he is talking about kind of parsimony, no action, let it go, this kind of concept. If you compare to Confucius, okay, they talk about doctrine of mean, okay? The mean means kind of the perfection, okay, perfect golden mean, okay? So you have to perfect yourself. That's what Confucius talking about. If you go to cross the ocean, go to Greek, ancient Greek, Aristotle also talk about this kind of mean, temperance. I think that's the virtue Aristotle kind of praise, right? Aristotle is talking about with wisdom, with wise, right? Use your knowledge, use your intelligence, rationality to find the mean. So if you compare this, the same thing, not too much, not too little, different school have different kind of concept here. So I like to mention, that's what I like to mention in this chapter. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Now, anybody wants to comment on what they got from the chapter? Let's start with Aman. Aman, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to just address something that Jason was talking about with the word zi, which he said is translatable as parsimony or temperance. But in the second line, it's the word fu, and that is this one, copy and paste, that is being translated as temperance. I just wanted to read a commentary from one of these translations that talks about one of the discrepancies here, and I'll try and keep this as brief as I can, but it says, the Guodian version of the Dao De Jing has the verb bei, which means together, but all later versions read fu, which would have the same pronunciation in the past. If bei is read in its original agricultural sense as collecting grain, and ci in the previous line as storing, then we can see that the basic metaphor here is being derived from agriculture. What the translator is saying is that there is another way to interpret these passages, and the Guodian version, which is the older version of the Dao De Jing, seems to have this other word, bei, which means to gather and store like grain. Most of the translations I've ever read do have this idea of moderation or temperance or parsimony as sort of the theme that runs through the chapter. But I just wanted to bring to light that there is another way of reading this chapter, and it kind of draws out a very different metaphor from the whole from the whole thing. But then it feels more logically consistent when you see this idea of storing allows for early submission, allowing that allows one to become invulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to share that, but I did like this translation. It was fun to work on it, and it was definitely a challenging one.
Amon, can you do me a favor? Can you read from the translation that
Sure.
you used earlier? Can you name the translation? I really like the kind of the staccato and very concise, sharp way in which he uses words. Go ahead. Which one was it?
So this is the Edmund Ryden version. And this is the same version that took me through grad school, as this is the translation to go to at the time. His translation reads, "In governing others and serving heaven, there is nothing like storing. Such storing is achieved through prior collecting. Prior collecting is called doubling the accumulation of vitality. If you double the accumulation of vitality, there is nothing you cannot overcome. When there is nothing you cannot overcome, none can know your limits. When none can know your limits, then you can possess a country. When you have the country, concentrate on the essentials. You can endure for long. This is called the way of being deeply rooted, firmly entrenched, long-lived, caring forever."
Wonderful. Thank you,
It's
Amon.
not,
Go ahead.
it's not as, thematically, it's a bit different from a lot of the other translations, but it always felt like the logic felt more consistent when it read this way.
Thank you. Could you put the name of the author in the chat, please? Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I could do it.
Thanks. Next up is going to be Jason, Brian, and Madeline. Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Amon. You talk about another version. Can you type the Chinese words in chat, because I think that's interesting. You know, you talk about the means of storing grain. Okay, if you type the word, that's wonderful. Because if that means storing grain, that fit perfect in the whole sentence, because that means, you know, that words means prepare early, okay, and everything lead to the rule in the country. Okay, so I like to know that words. I think that would be very important, yeah, to me, actually.
Give me just a minute. I'll have to hunt it down because I don't have it here in Chinese. It'll be just a minute.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian. Brian, go ahead.
This is really, maybe it's more of a question, but I was interested when it says this depends on virtue gathered in the past. And is that basically just talking about tradition? And then I thought perhaps the idea is that you know virtue by how well it has worked in the past, as opposed to some rational system of thought that could be supported for some idea of virtue. You would reject that, but just look at what has worked in the past.
Wonderful. Would anybody like to comment on this concept of gathering? Jason or Amon, would you like to comment on what does this gathering mean?
I would like to see the word first.
Okay, sure. Then we'll come to it. You can pick up on that anytime. Madeline, followed by Abraham. Madeline.
Yes, this vitality, is that chi?
Okay, one more question. We'll have Jason answer. He's waiting for one word. Let me go ahead.
Well, Madeline, what do you mean virality here? I don't see any words I can.
In the translation that that Aman just read, it was talking about doubling the vitality. And
okay.
I was wondering if vitality is from chi, or what the meaning of vitality would be in there.
Okay, I just look at the original word. The original word doesn't mean chi. The word means nothing cannot be, that means invincibility, okay? Nothing cannot not done. Nothing cannot undo. So that means it's invincibility. Okay, so I think that's the words the original text means. So I just have to answer no, nothing with qi, because
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to try to answer Brian's question. I really like this term, gather here. So again, I'm going to read Ursula Le Guin's translation. In looking after your life and following the way, gather spirit early, and so redouble power, and so become invulnerable. So it's about kind of taking in the core and making it a part of you, doing that early and keeping on doing it, so that invulnerable, unlimited, you can do what you like with material things, but only if you hold on to the mother of things will you do it for long. Have deep roots, a strong trunk, live long by looking long. So it is about kind of taking in the core principle that makes, gather the spirit, taking in the core principle, make it yours, make it a part of you. And the more you do it, the deeper the root you have, you're operating from the center. And then you can do a lot. So that's how I understand it. Next up is going to be Abram, followed by Brian Nelson. Abram.
Yeah, so this 59 especially reminds me of the book. I don't know detail, I know just a little bit the title. There are 4 books and 5 classics in Confucianism. So one of them is called Middle Way, written by the only grandchild of Confucius. His name is GC. I don't know English pronunciation, GC. So in order to study Confucianism, you need to at least study 4 books. So Daehak, and there are a few. Third book is Middle Way. So Middle Way is actually dealing with this temperance. Whole book is about that. But I don't know too much detail, but I know the major contents of it from my high school memorization. Yeah, so it's interesting that the Taoism, and this part is have overlapping portion of that middle way. But I think Taoism seemed more encompassing. So it's broader and it seemed to have depth, I would say. Yeah, that's my impression.
Thank you. Thank you, Abram. Next up is Brian.
I also had a thought about Brian's comment. I really liked it because, again, it introduced the element of time, the gathering, collecting over time. In this case, it's the past, not the future. I think there's some uncertainty also as regards the past, and I could tie into Sri Kant's comment to gather the spirit or the focus on the core. I think it's over time that you learn which of your experiences are reveal the spirit or reveal the core, and where is your core in relation to those experiences? Where is your spirit in relation to those experiences? And it's the core and the spirit that endure, and the other stuff I think falls away. So too much that's just my own. When I heard Brian say that, that's just the thing that struck me. And then I used Sri Kant's words to capture it. But just the idea of collecting, I think if it's not understood in that way, sounds an awful lot like hoarding. And hoarding, I don't think is what we're going for here.
Wonderful. I like the distinction between hoarding and going to the core, because going to the core, it's like I'm reading through these multiple translations, like this is Clatfelter. It says, if you keep returning to this central root, you will possess forever awareness undilute. So Ursula Lingwith calls it the mother of things. You know, if you hold on to the mother of things, so it's like going to the core. So you're collecting not these 10,000 things, but you're collecting the thing that gives rise to the 10,000 things. You're building the habit of it. You're internalizing it. You're making it a part of you. Next up is Jason.
Yeah, I found the word. So okay. So right now I will get my
Good. I was going nuts.
Okay. Yeah. I find the word. Yeah. Okay. So I would say, okay, the word I put in the chat. The word means this. Chinese is an agricultural country, right? It's a seasonally. So the worst thing is you eat all the grain, and in the winter you die. You're hungry to die. So everybody know you have to store when you have it. So the word means collection. That's right, because when you have harvest, you collect and store, but not holding, you store it. And also imply that in this sense implies reserve, okay, parsimony, okay. So I think in here it has a double meaning. By the face it's collecting, but it implies parsimony. Okay, because the reason I say that, because I check in the ancient use, they already use as parsimony, not just collected. So parsimony is not today's use, that's ancient use. And that's explain why it talk about early preparation, okay? Because parsimony also means early preparation, not stingy. Okay, so I think that's the word I got it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I like that distinction very much, because you're collecting things, but you're not, like, hoarding means you keep all these many things separate, and the sheer fact of many things begins to weigh on you. What the kind of collecting is talking about is assimilation, so that the essence of the things that you're collecting becomes a part of you, and that is going to this mother of things. So you're holding on to the mother of things that allows you to act from that center. Wonderful. Anybody else has any comments? Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so let's Kevin followed by Brian. Kevin.
Oh yeah, for that, that's a word amazing. That's about a word change. That's why our modern day is hard to, we take negative again. We carried like people have something, just save it, don't share anybody. For old days, that one, you got a crop, you need like harvest time. You need, it's a very long year, you harvest, you need to save it. Thank God, thank sky. You have it, you need to save it, put a storage. So that from that kind of feeling. One Chinese word called 珍惜, 爱惜, love and save. I know English don't have such words to describe that I didn't find it. 珍惜. Maybe Amun and Jason have, or Jane have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Okay.
Penny.
I just had a very quick thought there after what you were saying about collecting and not hoarding. But to me, it seemed like, I mean, what you're collecting is you're collecting experience and the way to see all the different things that happen in the world, to the point where you're never going to be surprised. You're always going to be able to move forward. And that's where I think when they say you're invincible and you're unlimited, because something isn't going to happen that's going to throw you off track, because you've seen so many things that you can always move forward.
Thank you. Margarita.
Yeah. for me, I still have a bit of problem of understanding this verse because even in Bahasa, I was confused because there is this word translated by Jason, early submission or early preparation, by I don't know the other one, this prevention, but in Bahasa it's translated as the law of the nature. So if one does moderation, it follows. Just a sec. That means he understands the law of the nature. By understanding the law of the nature, that means storing virtue. So I'm not sure how to understand what is actually prevention or early submission here. Thank you.
Yeah, let me comment on this one. The word they are using is so-called 早, okay, early, okay, and fu, that's the second word, fu. So the second word you can consider as a submission or consider as a preparation. So that means do it earlier, okay, okay. So I think that's stick with the word. So it's related to the original parsimony or collection, right? So you think about like parsimony means collection the grain. So nobody said that farmer collected the grain as a hoarding or stingy. That's out of necessity, right? So I think that's the word I have to say. So law of nature, well, you can claim that's law of nature, okay? But I will say, in my opinion, probably too far away from the original text. Yeah, thank you.
Amon, do you have any comments about this point about early, gathering early?
This was why I said this was a challenging one to sort of go through and do the translation. Because it does speak to preparation for sustainability. There's an idea of cultivating that is often brought up in Taoism. And if we go back to those agrarian roots and think about, if you cultivate a field well, you'll reap a large harvest. Once you've reaped this harvest, you know, if you have a bumper crop, or if you were to get it, your harvest in earlier than expected, that could be part of this idea of early submission, but carry that over into self-preparation. So do the work early on that you need to have stored and gathered your resources as you need them. And that way, when it comes time to shine, to show your virtue, to reaccumulate that virtue, it renders you invincible is a good translation, but beyond the realm of the harms that would come from privation. You've done the work to prevent yourself from being harmed by your own ill preparedness. Weathering a storm, Katie, is actually a really good example. If you've put up the boards, if you've taken down the banner, if you've done all the work in advance, then when the storm hits, you will weather it well. If you've not done the work in advance, or you're scrambling at the last moment to do it, well, you didn't read the yarrows right. You didn't anticipate the world correctly. And I think that is an element that's here that says, anticipate from the world that it's not always going to be this bumper crop. You won't always have this good yield. So keep in reserve what you need so that even when it's bad, you're able to persevere. I think metaphorically it can be extended, but I think the metaphor is derived out of some very sort of concrete lived examples of peasant Chinese in the 4th century BC.
Thank you, Amon. Margarita, I mean, the way I'm seeing this, I see it as at a spiritual level. And the best example I can give you is Indian classical music and how it grows in you. So it's saying gather spirit early. So if you start the preparation early, you start singing as a child, singing from the core of your being and doing that over and over and over and over again, collecting the spirit, collecting as much as you can, and then letting your spirit express it, you become this unlimited, and you can do what you want. In music, you can do what you want because you have that deep preparation. You can see it in great singers like Ella Fitzgerald, for example. Like, she can do, because she's gathered so much and she has gathered the spirit. She's not collected. It's not like hoarding. She's not hoarded music. As opposed to somebody who is singing a set song, but doesn't have the ability to do much with it. A person who has actually gathered spirit, actually gathered music in their soul, can sing because they have deep roots. They have a strong trunk, and they live long by looking long. So that's the kind of expression that I think this is talking about. Next up is going to be David Adelson. David.
Yeah, two comments. I mean, one based on what everybody's saying about collecting. One word that came to my mind was integrating. That it's a matter of, is it not just statically collecting all this information or preparing for this, but then integrating, synthesizing it in the preparation. The other is related to all of this discussion about grain and crops. I mean, this talk about cross synthesis of different religions. This remind me very much of the Joseph story of 7 good years and 7 bad years, and preparing for that. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is Abraham, Marco, Madeline, and Kevin. Abraham.
I'm reading only translation 5 of them provided by the link, and there, the chapter 59, there seem to appear at least 2 the way, Dao, in Korean, Do. And so I have a questions maybe to Jason or Ammon, who seem to be familiar with Chinese character. I'm a little bit, but not fully fluent. But how do you what's your definition of Dao or the way? Maybe 1 or 2 sentences. It will help me to understand. And also, how would you differentiate philosophy of Dao and the Taoism? If I can elaborate just a little bit, is the philosophy of Tao is about the Lao Tzu and Zhang Zhu, but Taoism seems to convey a little bit different. So this is a little extra question anyhow.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason. You can answer whatever the direct question.
Yeah, actually, it's a big question, but
a short answer, because we're focusing mostly on number 59. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think over the time, Abraham, you will get it, because okay. I think one thing I would like to talk about is Tao is so important, just like Eastern in the Muslim. Okay, so everybody talking about Tao. It's not only Taoism. Confucius is talking about Tao. Legalism also talking about Tao. Everybody talking about, even today's people talking about Tao. So that's what I want to talk about.
Thank you, Jason. Next up is Marco, Madeline, and Kevin. Marco.
For me, like especially the Mitchell version, like I'm seeing a little bit of like the being like water thing, and like taking things as they come and sort of like being malleable and sort of not sticking so much to like what you think and what you expect to happen, and trusting your intuition.
Thank you, Marco. Next up is Madeline. Madeline.
Yes. As I'm listening to this discussion, it's reminding me of the sessions that you had, Shrikant, on the OODA loop. which for those who aren't familiar, it was a kind of a philosophy or epistemology developed to use by fighter pilots of how to act quickly in the moment using all the information you can get. So there was the quick action in the moment that was highly skilled, dramatic, showy, and would do whatever it takes to win. And then one of the other things they talked about with the OODA loop was all the practice that goes into it, all of the planning and the infrastructure that goes into manufacturing and maintaining military planes, training the pilots, setting up the training programs, making sure the materials are ready for the planes. So in that sense, it is actually quite a bit like the OODA loop.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. In the Art of Learning, Josh Waitzkin talks about these circles. So it's like when you're learning Tai Chi, you're kind of doing these circles, and the circles become smaller and smaller. And you kind of, they become more and more automatic, and they become a part of you, and they become part of your repertoire. Next up is Kevin.
Yeah, I want to make another point about that time still agriculture focused, food, crop, that's the main. So it's crop is like, that's first thing. Everything, that's first point. Second is, I keep reading this, I found out like we modern day separate materialist and spiritual separate. You think about our life, something like you as farmer raise a crop by hand. So you have to, you soil allow the nature, according to the nature, then eventually you have a crop, how to prepare for the either drought or flood. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Really, this comment's an accumulation of many sessions I've listened to and also the discussions today, but a thought was triggered, I think when Marco was talking, that a good metaphor or analogy beyond or, maintaining the center or the balance or harmony, it might be remaining buoyant like a fish in the sea. The sense I have from the Dao De Jing is that the reality in which we're living is not solid like the earth. It's more fluid like the sea. And what he's asking us to do is to be buoyant like a fish underwater. They can deal with the calm seas, they can deal with the currents, they can deal with the storms. That's just struck me, and I wanted to share that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. All right, folks. So next up, we are going to do on Sunday. We are going to do this meetup with Jason. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time, and what we'll do is that we'll have Jason read a bunch of his verses so we can listen to them as a whole, just because now when he reads it, he's explaining them, but I would like to hear them as a whole and then discuss them. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I invite you to come. Jason, you want to make any comments?
So should we read? So you talk about reading. Probably better way is read one chapter, discussing. Read one chapter, discussing. That's what you want to do.
No, what I want to do is I want to read at least maybe a bunch of chapters, because I want to get a sense of. I want first to get a sense. Maybe we can choose 10 chapters or 9 chapters, because 9, 9, 9. So maybe we'll go with 9. It's 81 chapters, so we'll go with.
So I'm not sure we should do it in order, or I just pick something, because this would be okay. Let's try in the order. Okay, let's do 9. Just
Let's do 9 and let's see what it feels like. And you're welcome to pick up any chapter you want. But what we will do is that just read it through so people can experience it as a whole. So can we go ahead?
Okay, 9 times 9. That's a perfect. So I'd like to talk about 81 chapter. That's right, because that's a perfect number. That's a good Taoism number because 10 is a perfect number, but one step behind the 10.
Yes.
That's best. And the 9 times 9 is 81. That's the reason. And so we should follow the rule 9 for 9 weeks. Okay.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So folks, looking forward to seeing you there. See you on Sunday at 8 p.m. And then again on Tuesday. So looking forward to that. All right. Good night, everybody. Bye.